is AI now a bubble? Because you've seen this on the internet, right? Like a lot of people in the comments will say, AI is now overhyped. It's a bubble. Nothing new is happening. LLMs have hit a wall. Luckily for us, there is a report by a gentleman named Benedict Evans, who's worked in tech analysis for many, many years. And he actually has a report called AI Eats the World, which I thought was a fantastic report. And every weekend, I will collect a bunch of these reports in different sectors. And I keep reading these reports because you never know what you'll find. Sometimes there are things that you don't believe are opportunities, or you probably haven't looked hard enough at a specific thing, but an analyst can come and say, actually, there's a lot of buying behavior here, or there's a lot of customers leaving here. So these things are very important, and therefore I thought it's important for me to make a video on this. We will go through the question of, is AI eating the world, or is AI a bubble? And we'll go through it with data, with facts, and with examples from the past revolutions like the internet revolution and this one. Are they the same? Are they different? We'll go through all of it in a very, very information-dense video. Welcome to Breakdown. Before I start, I want to tell you that Breakdown is supported by the 01 network. See, when I make content for my channel, I have to make it slightly simpler so that a large audience understands it. But with Breakdown and the support of the 01 network, I can actually laser focus on just the smartest, most business-savvy audiences. He starts with a slide which says AI is the next platform shift. He says that every 10 to 15 years, a platform shift reshapes technology. If you went back in time, 10, 15 years ago, to the beginning of the smartphone shift, and you asked yourself, what are the jobs that people are doing? You'd find that a lot of them were doing jobs for the previous shift, which was actually the web shift. And if you keep going backwards, you'll find the PC shift, you'll find mainframes before PCs. And that's when you have this really insightful thought about jobs, which is that actually most jobs are just like, they're very temporal. They're 10, 15 years, and then they switch over into something new. They have some remnants of the old, but they actually become totally new jobs. And it's hard to predict what new jobs will be formed and what old jobs will die. According to Ben Evans, the new platform shift is generative AI. So he asks, what happens in a platform shift? Who is affected and how much? So he starts with this thing called, it's the new thing. When a platform shift happens, it becomes the new thing. It becomes the exciting thing, which AI has been for many years. He says that all tech innovation, investment, and company creation switches over. The defining factor about a platform shift is that everything becomes that thing. Even if you were a flower seller, you didn't need to do this on a computer. You would have sold your flowers on the street. But the minute we had the web and then we had smartphones and we're in this era, it makes sense for you as a flower seller to sell your flowers online. But now with generative AI, you're seeing some of these people use generative AI to make their flowers look prettier, to make better ads, to make content around their flowers. Then he says there are two segments. There's inside tech. So inside of technology, new gatekeepers arrive, new value capture arrives, so new winners arrive, and new and bigger markets get formed. Outside the world of technology, people ask, is this a new tool? Is this new revenue? Or is this an existential threat? These are three mindsets that people outside of technology think in. Benedict Evans talks about how dominance is won and lost. So he says that in the PC era, Microsoft absolutely dominated. But then when the smartphone shift happened, Microsoft, with all its power and might, they lost. Who won smartphones? Apple and Android. Whereas Apple with computers, they had some dominance, but they were not as dominant as Microsoft. But yet, with phones, they became number one. It's so interesting to say that between 1980 and 2015, the Microsoft OS share of global computer sales units was almost close to 100%. Look at where it is now in 2025, and this includes mobile phones as well. The phone you use doesn't run a Microsoft OS. So it doesn't matter if you were a winner in the past revolution, the question is, can you be a winner in the next? This actually explains why Microsoft bet so hard on OpenAI in the early days. It wasn't any other company, it was Microsoft backing ChatGPT. It's the reason why Mark Zuckerberg will go and do the Meta Ray-Bans to win hardware, because he has been under Apple rule for so long. So he's like, I don't want to be subservient to their rules. I want to win the next hardware platform. That's why he's been so bullish on building, the smart glasses. So how will the new thing work? We don't know. For every new platform, we forget how many ideas failed and how unclear everything was. So in the internet era, we saw AOL do very well. We saw Yahoo do very well. And then when we moved to mobile internet, we had J2ME, we had WAP, we had Nokia, we had RIM. Where have they all gone? Now, if you come to generative AI, which of the things is going to die? Is it going to be the MCPs? Is it going to be wearables? Is it going to be voice? Is it going to be agentic AI? Nobody knows. Nobody knows which companies are going to win. Nobody knows which companies are going to die. It's very hard to tell. That's why all the investors are investing across the board in multiple different companies. So whenever a new platform shift comes out, there's noise, there's hype, and there's anti-hype. So there will be people who come out and say, this is the next best thing, and AI is going to take over everything. There will be people who come out and say, no, AI is useless. When this happens, this often brings bubbles. Because the people who are very bullish about the technology go and invest. The people who are not bullish about the technology go and start shorting stocks. So the point that Benedict Evans makes is that generally, every bubble is different. You can't predict the rules of the previous bubble to the new one. There will be a lot of winners and there will be a lot of losers. But when the dust settles, the world changes. And if you look at the internet, the use of the internet, if you went back and looked at some of the news clippings at that time, what people said about the internet, good things, bad things, it's the same thing, right? A lot of people thought the internet was a bubble. But if you look at it, the internet went from, oh, it is a hot new thing, to it's a basic part of daily life. If you look at the US heterosexual couples who met online by year of meeting, in 1995, 0% of people met online. In 2020, close to 60% of people met online. That's a staggering stat. You tell me, did the internet change lives? Now, if you went back to 2000s, a lot of people will tell you, internet is hype, it's a bubble, the internet has no impact on the economy. But today, as you can see from this stat, you use the internet every day. That doesn't mean companies in the internet era did not die. Absolutely did. Yahoo, Netscape, Sun, so many companies went out of business. But the internet has impacted lives in the long run. The same thing is probably going to happen to generative AI, but like Benedict Evans says, not all bubbles are the same. New platforms mean new tools and new revenue. So when we had mainframes, it was just one app. When things moved to the cloud, when we had the web revolution, people paid for many apps. So in this next phase of LLMs doing automation, how many apps are we actually going to pay for? That is a giant question mark. One way this platform shift is different compared to other shifts is that for PCs, the web or smartphones, we knew the physical limits of what was going to happen next year. So we knew that today the smartphone is going to be like this. Next year, this is going to be announced. This is going to be 20% better. Kind of had those benchmarks, right? Because we knew how long it took to produce this technology. We already knew who was producing it and what their claims were. With the LLMs, it's no man's land. You can't predict what is going to happen next year. You cannot predict whether image generation will be completely solved. And with the sheer amount of money being thrown there, nobody knows. That's what's different about this shift. We don't know how much better this could get. Today's models are the best as of today, but 3 months later, it could be much, much, much better. So the question is this generative AI curve going to be the same as the internet curve and the smartphone and the web curve, which is goes up a little bit and then gets flat? Or does it just keep going like this? Is it multiple curves in one? So now let's move to the second bubble, which is inside tech. So Sundar Pichai had this quote from Q2 of 2024, after which they've had a spectacular quarter. Remember, Google has outperformed in the last quarter, right? And he said, the risk of underinvesting is significantly greater than the risk of overinvesting. Yes, Google could lose a lot of money doing this AI thing, but if they don't invest, they lose everything. The reason he said this, and a lot of people who say that AI is a bubble or whatever, right? You should ask them how often they use Google. Google, the search engine, was something we all used every day for everything. But now a lot of that behavior has moved to this new platform, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is. And that's a big risk for Google. Google search is their crown. If they lose that, they lose everything. So the risk of underinvesting is much worse than the risk of overinvesting. Mark Zuckerberg has a similar quote from Q3 2025. The very worst case would be that we have just pre-built for a couple of years. And the thing with new platform shifts is it's all about experimentation and learning. See, most people who watch these videos are doing jobs where you have a set path. You know, if you do something for 3 years, you'll get a promotion. Unfortunately for you, and I'm breaking the bubble on this video, those paths are fake and they can change at any time. But if the company does not give you that certainty of a path, and a few companies don't get together to give you certainty of that path, you will lose your mind and you will have problems predicting the future, taking loans. Like, it makes your life much tougher, which, to be very honest with you, is not real. Companies, it's a little bit different, right? You don't know where the future is. So you're sort of experimenting, you're seeing kya chalta hai, and worst case scenario, a little too early. But if the world gets into a point where they start using this, then, we'll say we already have the expertise here. We already have, advantage here. We already are manufacturing. We can quickly make the next version when the world is ready for it. But if you're too early, you might end up wasting a lot of money. Anyway, there's been 3 years of FOMO in big tech. It's a huge new market, a huge threat to all our existing businesses, like Google example, and we can't miss it. One more thing about AI, which is different from every other, revolution in the past, is that AI keeps getting better with more capital expenditure. With more CapEx, which is the more spend you have on these LLMs, because of how scaling laws work, the better it gets. So the question here is, how much better can it get and how much CapEx? Sometimes you could spend trillions of dollars on something and you got really, really, really good and then customers don't pay for it. So these are real risks in a business like this. So FOMO today, which is fear of missing out, is actually driving a huge CapEx surge. So in 2025, there's been $400 billion of spend for the big four alone, which is Microsoft, AWS, Alphabet, Meta. There's so much money going in this right now that it's mostly because nobody wants to miss out on building this electronic god. In fact, today, US data center construction is overtaking offices. If you look at US construction value in $1 billion, you can see that data centers, which is marked in red here, has started climbing to the point where it's just below offices. Offices have gone down. And of course, Nvidia can't keep up. Just look at Nvidia's quarterly revenue. In fact, a few weeks ago on Nikhil Kamat's podcast, I think I was talking about Nvidia and I said they have CUDA. Anyone who's built anything with AI, you know that you can't escape CUDA. And at that point, AMD didn't have an equivalent. Even today, their equivalent isn't very good. So I said, that's why I'm long on Nvidia, right? If this continues, then Nvidia is going to be the winner. And it's the only public market accessible way to enter the AI race. So Nvidia has had a crazy, sort of run, great earnings. Now, I don't know how that's going to play out in the future. I feel like now we might be at the point where the increased capital expenditure might not really reflect in excess revenues for the people using these chips. So they might not really invest as much. So I'm not as bullish about Nvidia today as I was 3 years ago, because 3 years ago it was obvious it was going to grow. Now it might stabilize at that price or drop. Like nobody knows, nobody can predict the future, but it's not as much of a gold rush as it was 3 years ago because all these secrets are now in the open. But TSMC can't keep up, right? TSMC, who works with Nvidia, can't keep up to maintain Nvidia's order book. So the demand is still through the roof. It's now even affecting US power backlogs. So Kevin Scott, who is the Microsoft CTO, went out and said it's been almost impossible to build capacity fast enough since ChatGPT launched. It's a good problem to have. Microsoft says that we now expect the FY26 growth rate to be higher than FY25. Remember, these are public companies. They cannot bullshit you with these sort of quotes, because they bullshit you and the stock actually drops. They don't hit their earnings. So it still feels, even with Nvidia, Microsoft, there's still a year, maybe 2 years of juice left. And after that, we'll have to re-see again, depending on how the future is moving. Alphabet also expects a significant increase in 2026. One more important thing is that the hyperscalers can actually afford it, which is that Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft actually have the free cash flow through regular business. And I love this, right? Like when people go and talk about Google or Meta like they are some research companies, I'm always like, do you know what makes them money? Advertising. Both these companies are advertising companies. Advertising is a very high free cash flow business, right? Which means if you charge 10 rupees, you're making 10 rupees of profit, right? Or 9 point something rupees of profit. So they have the free cash flow and the profit to actually go out and invest in capital expenditure. So all these 4 companies have the free cash flow. They're not going to sit on it and do nothing. They are investing. The choice is either put it in like, a bunch of stocks and hope it grows, or invest in new R&D. And they're like, what am I going to do with a little more money sitting in my bank? What am I going to do with 5-10% rate of return? What am I going to do with 20% rate of return? Might as well shoot for the moon. That's why you're seeing so much capital expenditure go in this. But Benedict Evans says the cost of AI is so high that it's even giving some of these guys trouble. It's not very easy to plonk $500 billion. We look at a billionaire and we think of how much somebody with $1 billion would have. Now think about $500 billion. So I'm always like, at the scale of having multiple $1 trillion, to still worry about spends is a big deal, right? To still worry about, oh, I need to spend $500 billion. But remember, it's capital expenditure. It's not an ongoing expense. It means if I build the capacity today, then my next 10 runs are, much cheaper instead of renting chips from somebody else, which is an important thing to think about. So one example here is Oracle, which actually might be spending on cloud capex, which is over 100% of its revenues. So one question that the Wall Street Journal had for Oracle is that how exactly are they going to build this when they don't have the resources to build this? The costs are even higher than their revenue. So how exactly are they doing this? It means that even the hyperscalers are being stretched out a little bit. And of course, OpenAI has entered the mix, which is this new player, which is not exactly a hyperscaler, which doesn't have the revenues or the free cash flow of a Meta or Google or a Amazon, who has come in and said, hey, we are committing to 30 gigawatts of capacity at 1.4 trillion. Aspiration for 1 gigawatts a week of new construction at 20 billion per gigawatt, which is about $1 trillion annually, equivalent to 2/3 of the total current global base every year. Incredible numbers. Now, remember, this is still a question mark of whether having that much capex, going out and building that sort of data center will lead to a much better model. We don't know that yet. So these are crazy spends with a question mark of, is it actually going to keep getting better? And of course, a lot of people have spoken about the circular revenue, right? This sort of weird system where I told you, or when the last bubble broke, nobody knew who was going to win, who was going to lose. Nobody expected Yahoo or Netscape to lose. But this time, everyone's aware that we're playing poker and we're going all in on every round. One of us is going to go bust. So can we do this thing where we split our chips among each other so that even if one guy goes bust, he has some ownership in the other things so that we all keep ourselves afloat. Without its own cash flows, OpenAI has partnered with Nvidia, Oracle, SoftBank, and even petrodollars. OpenAI is buying Nvidia chips with Nvidia's cash flow. So Nvidia is invested in OpenAI, which OpenAI is then using to buy Nvidia chips, which is crazy to think about. And Nvidia's cash flow, remember, comes from the hyperscalers. So it's actually Meta and Google and a bunch of others have spent money on Nvidia, which they are investing in OpenAI to buy Nvidia chips again. It's just a crazy system, right? And then OpenAI is taking Nvidia's cash and then OpenAI is investing in doing a deal with AMD, which is an Nvidia competitor. Which gets even stranger when you realize Nvidia then invested in AMD. Nobody wants each other to fail. That's the game here. Let's ask if these are rational actors. What would you do if your company was sitting on a bubble? Nvidia has $72 billion of free cash flow and TSMC can't keep up with demand. So you'd use your excess free cash flow to buy demand. You'd buy some FOMO, which is you'll tell all your enterprise customers, oh yeah, Anthropic is buying, why don't you buy? We are going to run out of chips. OpenAI has mindshare and expensive stock. So OpenAI is something that everybody knows about. They have the distribution, they have the attention of the people. Even though all the models are sort of commoditized, it's very hard to shift from a ChatGPT to an Anthropic. If you're a daily driver of something, especially the normies would have, already started using OpenAI, it's very hard to get them to shift. But they don't have their own offline platform. They don't have their infrastructure. Tomorrow, you could just wake up and say, I will leave and go start using Anthropic. And that's it. So OpenAI is trying to swap their paper because their valuation is so high. They are saying, we will swap this paper, which is not real money right now, for hard assets and market position. We'll take $100 billion of our stock and buy some equity in companies, which potentially are making chips, right? We'll go buy hardware. We'll go do something with Jonathan Ive. So that's the OpenAI game. If you look at Oracle's game, Oracle is a cash generative legacy business. Okay, people used to go to Oracle because they want to, host their apps. And they've been losing market share to AWS for a while and now to AI. So Oracle's game is, I'm going to be irrelevant after this AI thing. It's the skip phenomenon, right? We spoke about the skip phenomenon. If you lose a platform shift, you bet harder on the next one. Microsoft lost mobiles, so they bet harder on AI. Facebook lost hardware, so they bet harder on hardware this time. Oracle lost cloud, so we're not going to lose AI. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to burn like mad people. So they're going out, they're stretching their resources, they're taking debt if necessary and saying, I'm going to burn myself into the new thing. That's why people are going to Oracle, because Oracle's like, I will go all out to make this happen. Where has the money gotten us? Models are still improving. Nano Banana Pro released yesterday. It's great. They're getting better, right? Like you can see that these models are fantastic. But there are far more models. You have Chinese models as well. You have open source models as well. The open source models are as good as last year's model. And they run on anybody's computer. There are no real moats. There is nothing preventing you from deleting the ChatGPT app and going to Anthropic. It was not true with the last shift. One thing Ben misses, in the last shift, a lot of the big winners had platform lock-ins, which is that once you started using Facebook and your friends were there, it's very hard for you to go and use another social network. Your friends are on Facebook. How do you convince all friends to move from Facebook to the new social network? It's very, very tough. The last generation had these network effect platform lock-ins. Network effects means that my friends are here, therefore I'll be here. The main feature of the platform is not the tech features, it's your friends. You're not using ChatGPT socially. And if you look at ChatGPT's entire game plan in the last few months, it is to try to make network effects happen. Why do you think Sora is the app? Why do you think it's not just a standalone thing where you can generate videos? Why do you think they made a social experience where you can cameo with you and somebody else? You think they're trying to gain network effects? What are they trying to gain? They're trying to gain, the only real lock-in is your friends being on that same platform. They're trying to gain that lock-in. That hopefully explains why Sora is doing multiplayer cameos and whatnot. Problem is, there are far too many models. Every week there are new models, new benchmarks. Benchmarks are being gamed, saturated, new acronyms. And honestly, compared to 3 years ago, even the smartest tech people, even the people with lots of time, are not sitting and using all the open source models right now. I used to use it 2 years ago. Now I'm like, you know what? They're actually behind. And there'll be some engineer who comes out and says, no, but this open source model can do this. But in a few weeks, ChatGPT will be better. And then Anthropic will be better. And then Gemini will be better, right? So Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini sort of triad of, we now have the best model in the world. We now have the best model in the world. We now have the best model in the world. It doesn't matter anymore. So you just pick a winner and you stick to it. That's the game that most consumers are playing. Once they start using ChatGPT, they're like, I don't care if there's a better update on Claude. I'm using ChatGPT, let me use it. And yes, that's what Ben comes to, which is that models converge and then leaders change weekly, right? The difference between all these leaders is like minimal. And this is the question that Ben now comes to, which is a question I thought about 3 years ago, right? Which is tech versus brand versus distribution. The models are commodities. And for those of you that don't know what a commodity is something where it's like selling potatoes. There's no difference between two potato sellers who are selling potatoes. The only difference becomes price. I'm selling at 5 rupees. Okay, sir, I'll give you at 4.9 rupees. You may think that's the only difference. The other difference is trust. I trust potato seller 2 more. Potato seller once, he charges less, but he screwed me once. So I trust potato seller 2. Third is storytelling. Maybe potato seller 2 is making a great performance. He's standing outside and creating content on Instagram and like really convincing you to buy potato from him. You've heard of potato seller 2, you've probably never heard of potato seller 1. So you don't even go to potato seller 1, you're directly going to potato seller 2. So that's the question. Tech versus brand versus distribution. And if you look at it, if you look at weekly active users of generative AI tools as share of the population in June 2025, ChatGPT has more than 20% in the USA. And if you look at Claude, it has very, very low numbers compared to ChatGPT. Just look at this graph. You can see ChatGPT is the clear winner on distribution. So I'll tell you one thing, right? On the business side at EOS, and even as a creator, we worked with ChatGPT, we worked with Gemini. The ChatGPT social media team, right? And the OpenAI social media team is very smart, very sophisticated. And they understand that distribution is the game. They understand that distribution and brand loyalty and making sure that the audience has early access to this is very important. And that's why I'm a big believer in creators as well, because in my opinion, everything is going to become commoditized. There's very little innovation actually happening in the world. And when innovation happens, people actually reject it for a while. Most of the things in the world are a commodity. You do need distribution to win. And if you look at it, both Claude and OpenAI, as we saw in the previous benchmark, both roughly the same. Look at the usage difference. They're both spending the same. They both have same kind of capital expenditure. Both need to spend lots of money to make these models. Look at the difference between having sub 3%, 4% ownership of the market and somebody owning 20+% of the market. One of those is going to lose because of huge capital expenditure and you're not making enough money back. And it's all about who you engage with. And just like India, UK, France, Denmark, Japan, they're much bigger creators than us that they're going to end up working with and make this happen, right? When commodities happen, distribution matters. And of course, to answer the question of is this a bubble, ChatGPT has close to 800 million weekly users. The question Ben asks is that why are only 5% of them paying? If they're seeing value out of ChatGPT, is most of the value just in the free product, GPT-5? Why do you need to pay? What is the value in paying? But this is a question he has, which is why are only 5% paying? And he also asks a follow-up question, why are you reporting weekly active users and not daily active users? Are people not using it every day? I use it every day. Other people not using it every day? And it turns out that today, still more experimentation than daily use. So far, many more people use chatbots occasionally than make them part of their daily lives, which was a strange learning for me. If you look at consumer generative AI chatbot use in the USA, monthly use is very high, weekly use is reasonably high, daily use is sub 10%. I thought it would be much higher. Actually, it's not just that one survey, right? It's Deloitte June survey. It's most data shows the same picture. So the weekly actives are much higher than the daily actives. The question is it that we're just too early or a harder problem? Why do most users of ChatGPT only use it a little bit? And this is something we need to deeply double click on. Why do most users of ChatGPT use it only a little bit? And it comes down to the question of use cases. How many use cases are an obvious easy fit? And if you think about it, most ChatGPT use cases are either health, advice, or job related stuff. And if you're using it every day, you're probably not going to ask for health and relationship advice every day. Probably use it once a week or a few times a week. But one thing you'd use it for every day is if you're doing a job, right? And you're consciously looking for ways to optimize that job. For everybody else, the question is, do you need to wrap ChatGPT or AI in a tool that they're already using? Somebody's already using WhatsApp. Does the tool need to be there? Does the AI need to be there? That's a question that Ben is asking. And it's a very interesting quote by Steve Jobs here, which is that people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And you got to start with the experience and then work backwards to the technology. This brings the question, where does the model lab compete? Do they compete at the level of like down at the stack, which is, I will just train the largest model, have the best output and put it out there. So should I go and maybe, get in the chips level? If the models are commodities, then you do that. If you think there's no value in the models, everyone's going to have the same model trained, then you do that. If you don't have network effects, if you can't get your friends on the platform, then you do that. The other side is go up the stack. Win on network effects and product. Somehow get your friends to use ChatGPT with you. Somehow get your friends to do Sora with you. Or you embed it into product. Let's say you're using a task manager every day. Say you're using Asana every day. You put it there. You embed it there. Do you do a deal with Asana and sell it as API? Right? Is it wrappers that make the most money? So the question is it wrapper or is it chips? Because the middle layer of making the models is seeming a little bit shaky according to Ben. And that's the question. Where do you compete? And if you look at Microsoft, we need to study Microsoft because they're the earliest mover in AI. If you look at what they've been doing, they used to compete on network effects. I'll tell you why. Even though Microsoft network effects wasn't really a friend's network effect, it was a Windows network effect. They had Windows in every computer and it's very hard. Once you start using Windows and you get familiar with it, it's very hard to move off. So when I send you a file, which is an exe, you can't run it on a Mac. You can't run it on Linux. So your friend has to have Windows to run an exe. Your friend has to have Windows to run many of the apps that come on the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you look at Microsoft, they started moving away from network effects to access to capital. They started investing in many of these companies and said, we will play a much more broader game. But if you look at OpenAI, what is OpenAI doing? OpenAI is doing everything. And this is the fundamental thing, right? This is the thing that people don't get. OpenAI is diversifying to the level of, we'll play at the chips level. They're doing some chip stuff. They're doing some infra deals. They're doing Oracle, Nvidia, Intel, Broadcom, AMD, everybody. They're like, there's not going to be one single chip provider that I'm going to hedge my future on. We're going to do e-commerce integration. We'll put it in Shopify. We'll put it in ads. We'll put it in vertical data sets. We'll make our own app platform, right? With the GPT minis back in the day to what they're doing now. We'll do social video, Sora. We'll do web browser. We'll do our own web browser lock-in. That's like a Windows type network effect lock-in, which is once you start using a browser, you rarely change it. We'll do everything. And then we'll also do robots. We'll get Jonathan Ive to do the hardware thing. Like maybe hardware is the thing. We'll do some biotech. OpenAI is like through and through. Because that's the thing, when you have unlimited money and you have big stock position, you can use that stock to buy companies. You can use that stock to leverage for deals. You can sell that stock for cash. Like you can take $100 billion from Nvidia and give them stock, right? Whatever that deal value was. So OpenAI is playing across the entire stack. And the thing is, OpenAI is bundling and unbundling use cases. So all of this, you can see OpenAI using ChatGPT. They're not just the model maker, they're They're like, we'll build all the apps. You don't see OpenAI today as a browser company. You don't see them as a social video company. You see Instagram as a social video app. But you don't see OpenAI as a social video company. You don't even think of them like that. You're like, they're an AI company. But I think OpenAI sees themselves slightly differently. OpenAI is like, we are the tech company. In order to justify this kind of capex, OpenAI has to win all of technology. They need to be the best music app. They need to be the best social video app. They need to be the best browser. Ideally, they need to be the best OS. Because as part of the package of AI getting better, it's easier to write software. And they're also attracting the best talent in the world. So tomorrow they might just wake up and say, let's do Windows. Sam Altman has gone out and said that we want to compete with Slack. So they're building everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if OpenAI 2 years from now has all the SaaS tools, has all the consumer, best music app, best social app, and lots of them will fail, but they're going to try at everything. But the problem is, startups exist to unbundle use cases. So if you look at Y Combinator, the startups in Y Combinator, they're trying to unbundle Google, Excel, email, Oracle, and even ChatGPT. They're like, we'll give you micro use cases. And because a lot of people want only a focused use case. I want one app that does only one thing. And lots of apps are trying to be that at Y Combinator. So they're playing the opposite thesis of OpenAI. But the question is, where is the value capture? If models are near commodities and we don't know the right product, where is the value? So is it the best model? No. It's the person with the most money. Because the person with the most money can go out, make that first capital expenditure in building that, data center, and then go and start making as many models as they want. So it becomes cheaper to do the next model if you have the most money. Is it proprietary vertical data? Probably. If you have some sort of vertical data in legal or this or that, it's useful. But to be very honest, not really, because there's a lot of legal data already available on the internet. And I think ChatGPT may not be as good as Harvey as a lawyer, but it's still reasonably good. And it's not very hard for ChatGPT to just come in and be like, hey, we'll add some more of this legal layer for you. Is it distribution and GTM? GTM stands for go-to-market. How do you get customers? Is it product? Is it how good the UI looks? And I think the UI, UX, and product, to be honest, all of them copy each other. So they're all going to have their own style, but they'll copy the best features. Or is it building software companies with AI sitting in the underneath, adding benefits? The question he leaves the world of inside tech with. Now, finally, there's the world of outside tech. How should the rest of the world see it? People who are not in technology. So for everybody outside tech, the question is, what is our AI strategy? Let's say you're a real estate company, you're a farmer, whatever, you're outside of technology. What's the pattern? Number one is absorb, which is, can we automate obvious use cases? Number two, innovate. Can we build new products with this AI? Are there interesting wrappers we can build? Can we bundle? Can we unbundle? Can we disrupt? Can we redefine the question? Can we say AI doesn't matter at all? Can we redefine the problem statement itself? The most successful use cases so far with AI are absorbing it, which is use it in coding, use it for marketing, use it for customer support, and use it for automation. If I were to guess, 90% of real wrapper use cases or real revenue in AI, it's been coding with Cursor. And by the way, even a company like Cursor would be considered slightly outside tech in this game that we're talking about. But inside tech is like the Nvidias and the OpenAIs and the Anthropics of the world, the big titans. You can use it for coding agents. You can, upskill yourself, and there's money there. Cursor has proven that there's money. There's marketing, where companies like EOS, for example, have used AI to really speed up their time to creating one unit of video. Then there's customer support, and we've seen a bunch of these interesting, you call some company and then AI answers. And I've seen some of these, right? Sometimes when you call some companies in India for a refund or whatever, then AI answers. And then finally, automation, right? There's a bunch of generic automation use cases. He talks a little bit about AI coding, vibe coding. He says that that's a new abstraction layer. Remember that, in my opinion, one of the biggest signs that something is going to do very well is when people treat it like a toy, right? YouTube for a long time was treated like a toy. It was just like, who puts videos online? And look at how much money YouTubers are making now. Similarly, vibe coding today is seen by actual coders as a toy. You don't know what you're doing. You're just like plugging things together. You don't even know how it's plugged in together. You go to an actual engineer and you ask him, do you know exactly what's happening in the computer? Which wire is beaming what electron where? Do you have any idea? They don't know. So nobody really knows the fundamentals of a computer. And therefore, I don't judge vibe coders who don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Because I'm like, it's just one more level of abstraction. We're already so abstracted. How does one know what to automate? So if you look at Accenture's reported new quarterly generative AI contracts, they are now doing $1,500 million in AI contracts. The step two is to buy SaaS. So if you look at Palantir, their quarterly revenue by segment has continued to grow up. And then of course, you have a bunch of companies trying generative AI pilots. It takes some time to deploy, and then you only see results like 2 or 3 years later. And if you see this graph, you'll see that most of the people are either in pilots or experiment. The actual amounts of deployed, very, very low. Because eventually people just find ChatGPT is better for 90% of my use cases. Even if I make this custom thing for my company, for all the sales reps in my companies to do blah, 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 you just find at some point giving them ChatGPT gives a better option. Sometimes not everything works. So let's take the next case. If you look at where we might look for change, what can LLM automation unbundle? If you look at online distribution, unbundle physical assets, the truth is, what Benedict Evans says, is that AI gives you infinite interns. So you ask yourself the question, do errors matter? How much do they matter? Because the thing about interns is, interns are high energy, they can get what you want done, but they're high error rate as well. They need to be corrected, they need to be course corrected into a path. So the question is, what use cases do you have where it's okay to have a little bit of an error rate? And then of course, the next question is, what can you do if you had unlimited such automated interns? Slight error rate, very smart, but maybe 2, 3, 5% error rate, but you had like thousands of them. You can deploy thousands of ChatGPT instances. What can you really do? What kind of business can you build when you have those two things? When we had steam engines, it gave Britain the equivalent labor of roughly 5x its total population by 1900. Now, what can you do with AI when you have so much more of that? And the answer that Benedict Evans comes to, which I came to 3 years ago, was brands spend $1 trillion a year to talk to customers. Plus rent, shipping, marketing returns. If you look at global ad revenue in 2024 in $1 billion, you had $200 billion go to Google search, a little bit go to YouTube, you had some go to Meta. So you had the split between Google, YouTube, Meta, a little bit to Amazon because people do spend a little bit of ads on Amazon selling their products on the actual platform. All other ex-China and then China. Those are the rest of the ad networks and then China. So if you look at 2 quotes, our new AI recommendation model drove 5% more ad conversions on Instagram and 3% on Facebook. And if you look at Google, which is advertisers that activate AI Max in search campaigns typically see 14% more conversions. And that's the thing. And if you look at these 3 articles that he's put out, right? Oreo maker Mondelez to use generative AI to slash marketing costs, or Unilever using AI to automate content or augment creativity with generative AI at L'Oreal. To be honest, 3 years ago, this question of if I had something with a slight error rate where the errors are acceptable and I had lots of them, what would I automate? My answer was content. Probably because we were in that space, we were already creating content and I could see the obvious use cases. If you remember back then, when we started working on the AI avatars, a lot of people believed it wouldn't work. Like, why would people watch AI avatars? But we were fairly sure that they would watch it, right? We were also fairly sure that, we can use AI images. We didn't know AI video would get as good, but we were like, we can use AI images in B-roll. And it turned out that's a crazy use case. And it's okay in an image if there's like 2-3% wrong if you're creating content. It's okay if my AI avatar by mistake, the lip sync is slightly off. Customers are accepting of a 2-3% error rate. Whereas if we use the same thing for customer support, customers are less accepting of error rate. I looked for problem statements that had slight error rate. Viewers were okay with slight error rate that wouldn't impact performance, but would greatly impact costs. I think there's one more space that AI will really disrupt, not today, but a year or 2 later, which is 3D modeling. I think the text to 3D models are getting much, much, much better. And the day that happens, the day today Meshi 5 or a Tripo is good, but it's not good enough. But when it gets that good, both the art side as well as the modeling side are something that India has struggled with for many years. And it's always cost, you need like a huge number of people to actually, pull it off. And it's the same thing with modeling. Let's say a bracer, right, for a character, and you have an intricate design. Because in a game, you have some distance between the main character and that. In a year from now, there's a little bit of an error. There's a little bit of chip in how that design goes. No one's going to care. That 2-3% error acceptance rate already there because of the distance between you and enemies. So you might have to model everything for the main character, but for some of the enemies, smaller parts, you can start using generative AI. Not today, but maybe a year from now. So that's another opportunity we see, which is we're not there yet, but you have to start, like we started doing the content before the generative AI kicked off. So you have to be a little earlier than time. If you look at where generative AI is actually being used from a use case perspective, it's mostly now in advertising and content. Now, people keep saying this thing with content that the web is dying, but to be honest, they've been saying that since 1997. And you can see these two, right? You can see this Wired front page which says the web is dead. So it's been going on for a long time. Web doesn't die. There's infinite space for infinite people to come out and talk and make things, which is the beauty of the web. So anyway, apart from this, recommendation systems are also getting better, which is that at some point, and I know Meta will do this at some point, and which is something that, it's an opportunity that, we'll probably capitalize as well at EOS, which is that, let's say you bought packing tape and maybe you need boxes and bubble wrap. These two things they need. Meta already has this information about you, or Google already has this information about what you need next. So if you've already searched for a shirt, they will send you shirt ads. But the question is, can that shirt ad be generated on the fly? And instead of us doing like this one big ad once in 30 days, get a celebrity, can you do an ad every day, right? And there's a business we invested in called Headshot where we're doing one AI ad a day. And it just works. So we think that earlier we used to send people timed text ads, but I think there is a possibility to send people very personalized, very custom, ads that speak to them, speak to their problems without it being spam or slop. See, the difference between slop, which is this term people have for just generic AI content, and well thought out content is actually a lot about how much of you do you put in that ad, how much of your thought process in knowing the audience to put in the ad, right? And I think that at least with the way India is, because we all grew up with the same thing. Like, you can try this, okay? You know, a lot of people say that, oh, a lot of AI ads are slop, right? And there's no thought being put in the ads, and it's just, you know, trying to get conversions. But if you look at some of the ads you saw on TV, right, where a guy comes in and then says, Nirma, 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 washing powder, Nirma. Many of those jingles, you have so many of those jingles. Do you think those jingles are some 300 IQ intellectual process being sold to you? No, they're simple because they understand most people are low context. There's nothing I remember. I don't even remember what are the other features of Nirma in that ad. But I remember the jingle, right? And I think it's very important for you to understand that consumers on the internet are not sitting with full context. If you're watching this video till here, I have your attention, I have your context. It's different. But if you're just watching, you're scrolling, and one ad comes in and somebody's put money behind it, and you're seeing it, you're not going to remember anything. So sometimes, believe it or not, the simplistic ad works better. The visually impressive, simplistic ad is better with a simpler message. Instead of selling 4 things in one ad, you sell 1. And a lot of people categorize this as slop, but there's a reason it works. And if you categorize this as slop, then you would have to go back and categorize those Nirma ads also as slop. So yeah, the world is a lot more predictable than you think it is. And most people are running much lower context than you think they are. Now look, we've spoken about how customers are mostly running low context. But I'll also tell you one more thing about customers and viewers. They also are allergic to anything that they're not interested in. The minute you put an ad that's boring, even a little bit boring, or there's something that they're not interested in at all, they will scroll past like nothing. As much as you think that customers are stupid and they like this boring slop or whatever, it's not that. They're also very, very picky about what they want. So even if something enters their feed and they just don't like it, it won't even survive 0.1 seconds. So today, I don't see the difference between organic, well thought out content and advertising, because even if you put out an ad and you spent money on it, it doesn't guarantee that the customer will watch 0.1 seconds of it if it's not interesting to them. So it needs to be interesting to them. So I think the science behind organic content, inorganic content are blending, and the only difference is, do you put money behind it or not? Promote it to more people. And I think the question there is this fundamental question of, if people are now making money, right, and people have disposable income, I have actually come to the conclusion, I prefer to see ads for things I might be interested in. Anyway, I'm seeing ads. I prefer if I see ads for things I'm interested in. I prefer to see an ad for, a new unitary robot, if I can afford it, right? I prefer to see an ad for a new type of wallet that I haven't seen before. Like, I prefer these things, right? I don't want to see shitty ads. I don't want to see ads, t-shirts after I'm not interested in t-shirts anymore. I don't want to see ads for houses after I just bought a house. And today the AI knows. AI knows what ad to send you at what time. So it already knows your interests better than you know your interests. And instead of us just complaining about ads in general, I think we should be complaining about bad ads that waste our time, but we should be interested in good ads. And I think Ben captures it very well here, which is that the logistics, data utility, answers, solve my problem, that's all there. That's where, Ben goes to the idea of experience, curation, enjoyment, and authenticity. Today, you've stuck with this video till here. I've not charged you a single rupee to watch this video. It's come because I really am excited about this report and I wanted to share it with you. And this, to be honest, is an example of curation. This is not my report. This is somebody else's report. I'm curating it for you. And I'm adding my thought process on top of it. I'm layering my thought process on top of it. Those things will matter. So curation will matter. Experience will matter. Can you give customers an experience that they love? Enjoyment will matter. Like, did they enjoy something they trusted? Authenticity will matter. Are you being honest? Are you being straightforward? Or are you doing corporate speak? I think those things will matter. Here's one last segment, and I'm just going to end it with this, which is that it's AI eats the world, which is that we've had radical change in bubbles before, and we've also done some degree of automation before. We had elevators. We had elevators for a long time with people in them, and we had then electronically controlled elevators. A lot of people said this will automate jobs. And if you look at the graph of elevator attendance in the USA, it went from 0 all the way to close to 100,000 in 1950s to, again, back to a little more than 0 right now. So when automation works, jobs actually do disappear. What are the elevator attendants in 1950s doing now? That's a very interesting problem, homework problem statement for you to go after. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little more, and please do subscribe to the channel. Bye.